Hi, this is Ruth. Welcome to this week's video, and if you are new to my channel, it's really lovely to have you here. And yeah, so today we are going to talk about boundaries, and when I talk about boundaries, that's kind of a term that we use in counselling and counselling training. So it doesn't mean like physical boundaries as such. It's about the invisible boundaries and the boundaries that we live our life within, and we choose to set those boundaries to protect ourselves. So a good example of boundaries is in the workplace. So we tend to, like, if we're working in a building, we're working in a company, there will be a contract, there will be things that are expected of you and things you can expect of that company. And that's really commonplace, and everyone sort of expects that in the workplace. But when it comes to our personal life and our personal relationships and friendships and marriages, the actual boundaries of what we expect and what we can expect from others are often really woolly and not discussed. So this is something that we've been talking about on my counselling training, and I thought it'd be really good to talk about on a video, because I suddenly realised that I am really rubbish at creating boundaries in my personal life. I am a chronic people pleaser, and I will just become a chameleon depending on who I'm with, what they want me to be, what they expect of me, and that is like really not healthy. And I recognize that it's not healthy because I am changing who I am depending on the people that I am with. And I know we all do this to some extent because we're social creatures and we are wired for connection and being in community. But it's also important to know that creating personal boundaries is not selfish and is very necessary if we want to have healthy relationships where we know what to expect of others and we know what others can expect of us. So one of the examples that I find the most interesting is the fact that, you know, in a relationship with a romantic partner, for example, there are lots of things that are kind of assumed and often not discussed with one another. And we make all of these assumptions based on, in my experience, you know, watching other couples, looking at the society that we live in, watching films, reading books, cultural references of what's acceptable and what's not acceptable in a relationship. And if we never take the time with a partner to sit down and be like, you know, what are you looking for in this relationship and what's important to you, and then you can share what's important to you and what your expectations are in that relationship. If that never happens, which, let's face it, in my experience, rarely does that happen, then this is why someone does something and you're like, whoa, that's not okay, I'm not happy with that. But the other person might be like, well, to me that's just normal. So one of the main things that comes up a lot in counselling sessions that I've listened to and podcasts that I listen to around couples therapy is the idea of monogamy and this monogamy kind of continuum. So at one end of the monogamy continuum is the idea that couples are completely exclusive and you are not allowed to masturbate, you're not allowed to watch porn, anything that you take sexually from another person outside of the relationship is a betrayal. So that's one end of the monogamy scale. And the other end of the monogamy continuum is, you know, it's okay to have sex with other people, we're together, but we know that we're both going to want to be with other people and we're going to act on that, and that's okay, but we're still going to be a couple together. And so it's like there's very different scales of that continuum of what different people believe monogamy is. So for example, a woman could think that it's totally fine to be open about masturbation and watch porn. The guy could be like, that's not okay, I'm not happy with you watching, you know, guys watching girls on porn, I'm not happy with you doing that. And that's means that I'm not enough. So the idea that if that's never discussed, one person thinks it's okay and they're just totally happy with what they're doing, thinking that's a normal part of life. The other person is like, it's not okay. So communicating what we expect from relationships and what's okay is really, really important. And it's also the same in friendships. So for example, if you've got a friend that's very flaky and doesn't tend to like see it through on you arrange to meet up and then they don't keep to commitments and they cancel on you all the time, you know, to them that could just be like, oh, we just had a coffee in and it wasn't anything important, so I'm busy and we'll just rearrange it. Whereas to you that could be like, really, like, I've planned this into my diary, I've worked out time for us to spend together, and I was really looking forward to that. So it feels a little bit like a hurtful thing if it keeps happening. But if you've never said to your friend, you know, it's really important to me that we meet up regularly. If we put a date in the diary, let's say, you know, unless something really important comes up, we are doing that together. And if you don't ever make it clear that that's your feeling, then it comes to a point where they cross that boundary, that assumed boundary that you've had. And then you have to say to them, it's not on that you're always cancelling on me. And it hurts my feelings and I'm upset, but they've already crossed that boundary because they didn't know it existed because you never told them. And the same with the porn example. If you never talk to your partner about the fact that that's something that you're going to do and you see it as like a healthy part of your life, then, you know, they're just going to work off their own assumptions, and then they're going to be angry when they feel that you've crossed a boundary, but they never told you that they didn't want you to watch porn. So it's these small things that add up, and it's like, it's not necessarily that we want to sit down at the beginning of a relationship and write a written contract and each sign it to say, you know, you will be allowed to watch porn, you must keep to all coffee appointments that we have made as friends. It's not like that. It's more about, you know, doing it in an organic way, but it takes a lot of confidence and self-esteem, which, as I touched on in the beginning of the video, if you're a people pleaser like me, it takes a lot to say, actually, I don't really think that that's okay and I would prefer things to be like this. And if you want to do that, that's fine, but that may mean that we can't be friends, or may mean that I don't want to be in a relationship with you. So it is important to find ways to have like open conversations. It's about the communication in the relationship. So making sure you've got those opportunities to talk about stuff like this before it reaches crisis point, before a boundary's broken, before you catch your partner watching the porn or you find the porn on the computer. You know, it's like having that conversation when you're in a good place, because my counselling tutor was just saying this week that when you are in an argument or a confrontational situation, you only absorb 30% of the information of what's being said. So when we're saying, oh, you know, how many times have I got to say this? How many times do we need to have this argument? Then it's sort of like, well, only 30% of it's going in that context. So if you really want the message to go in and you want things to change, you've got to try and do it at a time when, I don't know, you've gone out for a meal and everything's good and you've got that space to talk, and you just bring it up in a soft way. I find personally that the best way to bring it up is to come from the I. So it's not like, you don't do this or you do this and I don't like it. It's like, I feel like I would prefer it if we could do this instead, or I like the way that you do this and I want more of it. So looking at what's good and focusing on what you want more of, rather than going in and saying, you don't do this for me, or you do this and I don't like it and I want you to stop. Because then you are being confrontational, you aren't taking responsibility for your part in the scenario, and you're not focusing on anything positive that you can build on. You're only focusing on the negatives. So they are probably some of the the best tips that I can think of starting a conversation around boundaries and doing lots of things to build up your own self-esteem and to believe that you are valuable and to really get to know what's okay and what's not okay for you, because we are all different. And I think what's okay for one person is definitely not okay for another, and we should not judge ourselves on having to try and be like everyone else. Like I say, there's a continuum, and some people are happy on one end of the continuum and some people want to be on the other end of the continuum. And it's all about that self-exploration of like, what are my boundaries? Writing down, why do I find it so hard that my partner does that and I don't like it? What's that saying about me? So it's not just what it's saying about them, it's what it's saying about you, and why do you feel that way? And if you start to self-inquire and explore, you may find that there's more stuff going on under the surface that you can uncover within yourself and become more confident about who you are, and knowing why certain things trigger you and knowing why certain things are important to you. So the key takeaways on the boundaries is boundaries are not just for the workplace. Boundaries are not just for professional settings. They are for friendships, they are for family relationships, they are for romantic relationships. There is no one size fits all in the boundaries, and that self-inquiry of asking yourself what's important to me, rather than calling them boundaries, saying what's okay, what's not okay, what do I want, what do I not want, and then thinking about how you can communicate that in the best way to that person, looking for a time when it's not reached crisis point, bringing it up when things are feeling pretty good, and coming at it from taking responsibility, those I statements. I feel this, I would prefer this, and this is why. And also not forgetting the positives. So, focusing on what they're doing really well, what you really enjoy, why you enjoy so much having those coffees with that friend, why it's so important to you. That's why it hurts you when they get cancelled. And I think that often leads to better outcomes in my personal experience. So yeah, let me know your experiences of this. I am so not naturally gifted at exploring these things with people because, like I say, I want to please people, which I don't want to lose because I love creating connections with people, but I also need to make sure that I'm not sacrificing what's important to me. And through self-inquiry, I've learned a lot over the last few years about things that are actually really important to me and things that are deal breakers. So I hope that's helped. Let me know, as always, in the comments if you want to like and subscribe and do all of that stuff. It should be on the screen now, like here. So I will see you next week for another video, guys. Thank you. Bye.